What's up, y'all? It's Eric Hatch and Robbie T of Hatch Coaching coming to you out of Fargo, North Dakota. Passionate real estate experts in the mastery game of just getting after it every day. And we've most likely been where you're intending to go, having the privilege to help run a top 50 real estate team in the country, trying to provide insight and guidance for all of you. Robbie, COVID's going on right now. All things feel like they're falling apart. And Robbie, I failed as a leader. Let me say it. I have failed. I have fallen short. I have screwed the pooch. I have wet the bed on leadership lately, man.
You're not perfect, man. What the heck? I thought you were. What the hell?
Dude, I screwed some major things up. I've done a lot of things right, but I've screwed some major things up.
Okay. What are they? What's going on?
I
saved you.
True. This is true confessions here. The severity of all this is unlike anything that we've seen. Yeah. And I had this unbelievable fear that our team wouldn't understand that this could all demolish us, right? That this could close our doors if we don't act early, if we don't adjust often. It could close our doors. Absolutely. And I was so scared to death that my team wouldn't understand the severity of it, because it's May 1st as we're recording this, Robbie. We just got through our best April that we've ever had, on top of our best March that we had ever had for pending transactions. And we're lulled into thinking, because in this short time frame, that it's because like COVID's not impacting us. No, COVID's deeply impacting us. But we're just successful because we had a really good first 3 months of the year. And that's why we're feeling that momentum now. And so I started to get in front of the team. And every time I talked to them, I talked about the what ifs and the dooms. And I said, change is coming. Like I Game of Thrones them, Robbie. I'm like, change is coming. Winter's coming. It's on the way. And it led up and led up. And I'm like, don't get comfortable right now. Please pay attention. Do all your lead measures. Get super disciplined with this. And then I had a one-on-one with somebody, and turns out they thought that I had abandoned all hope, and that all hope was lost, and that the walls were going to come crumbling down, and that I had changed. And I, as the optimist, as the vision caster, as the energizer, as the coach, as the altruism kind of guy, I had abandoned that for now fear-mongering. And whoa, dude, I have to still, and I'm unapologetic about stating how serious this stuff is and how much we have to work on it. And I went to my leaders, and I've been hammering them like, guys, we got to make a change. And Robbie, we operate at Hatch Realty. You know this. We operate with a budget of about $165,000 a month just to run our stuff. Like I used to make my first job out of college. I made $24,000 a year, you know? And now I have a budget of like $165,000 a month. It's stupid, right? And I told my team, I said, all right, here's our challenge is we have to cut $30,000 in expenses. Here's the P&L. Go through it, make some really tough choices, figure some crap out. And I handed it to them, and we came back as a leadership group, and only one of the 6 people actually did the exercise. They all scratched the surface and did the easy stuff, but it was tough stuff. Robbie, how are you at making tough decisions?
I mean, it's never fun. I don't like it. I don't think any of us like it. Our natural inclination as human, it's why the book, The Road Less Traveled, exists, is to take the easy path. Now, I try to fight that and dig deeper. Oftentimes, it takes somebody to challenge me and push me along that path, to be that outside person that says you can do a little bit more. But I think all of our natural inclinations is do what's a little bit easier.
Yeah, man.
So,
I think it's really easy to look at a P&L and to make cuts. But if that cut is in your department, if that cut is a person, and if you don't zoom in and see the whites of the eyes of somebody, you're irresponsible, aren't you, Robbie?
Yeah, and it's so tough to balance all of it, right? It's balancing the realities of those things and then making the tough decision that is the best decision for the collective whole of a company. That's why leadership is so difficult, because you're balancing so many different thoughts, opinions, people's feelings, and then cash flow and things like that. There's so many, it's not clear cut. And oftentimes there is no perfect decisions. And Eric, you had a coach that told you that life's just full of basically choices and consequences. And right and wrong is just subjective, right? It depends on where you're at. If you let somebody go because the business has changed and that role isn't needed anymore, you might come across as a huge a-hole to that person. But if you don't do that, when shifts like this happen, you find yourself in more financial hurt, and then you got to let somebody go that is now a big player. And there's just leadership is, it's why they say it's an art, it's not a science. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's we don't know what equals 2, frankly, and we keep trying our best. But obviously in your case, you're having to weigh so many things and so many different pieces, and so forth. So, but again, all I've learned so far today is you're not perfect. Just kidding.
So far, you've learned the right lesson. We need to understand that complaints and crap roll uphill, not downhill. And so when you're in a leadership position and in this place, like your whisper is a shout. All eyes are on you, and the things that you say matter. And I preached intentionally fear. Mm-hmm. Now, what I didn't do is I also didn't match it with hope.
Yeah.
Fear is important to talk about. If you ignore the pains of COVID and what's going on in your world today, I mean, that's irresponsible. That's stupid. But if you also aren't talking about the hope that that we are strong, we are resilient, we have a fire and a passion, and here's how we're going to get through it, even if the landscape changes, and what we need to do every day. And that's where I wet the bed on that, Robbie. I messed up. The other place I messed up in leadership is I really, really, really struggled with empathy. And I'm like an empathy guy, like to a fault. And because this weight had been so heavy for me, Robbie, I stopped understanding for my key leaders how heavy it is for them. So when I met with them and I'm like, okay, why didn't you make your 30,000 in cuts? What I failed to do is be like, hey, you didn't make 30,000 in cuts. Why is that? It's the same question, but it's a very different tone and a very different intent. And one is to blame and the other is to come from curiosity. And empathy is to say, I want to feel what you feel and I want to see what you see. And I just said, do your damn job. And everybody in our world is a spark away from igniting and being a dumpster fire right now. And I have screwed up by failing to be empathetic. Please tell me I'm forgiven, and then please tell me I'm wonderful, please.
Yeah, right. You are forgiven and you're wonderful.
Thank you.
So how'd you fix it? What'd you do? When it was brought up, what'd you do?
I sought out consult and I asked some of my other key leaders, not directly, but I'm like, how am I doing? What do you need? What are you feeling? And because we have a culture that is stemming around being truth tellers, and because I strive to be the most coachable person in our environment, I heard pretty quickly that I had abandoned some of my care for living in that fear. And I recognized that I was doing it because I was scared to death. And it's so funny, Robbie, here's a shameless plug, but I wrote a book called Play for the Person Next to You. And it talks about how when you're in pain, you actually will get farther when you tend to the person next to you. There's this planking activity that we do that's just a fantastic demonstrator of when you're in pain, cheering on the other person and being by their side actually gives you more strength. Mm-hmm. I'm the damn author of the book, Robbie, and I messed it up. This is tough right now. Those of you in leadership right now, this is tough. And I want to challenge you to step into empathy more. Mm-hmm. I want to challenge you to, even though understanding that you're scared and that you are uncertain for what's to come, your best energy will be put talking about the pain of today, but living in empathy for where they're at. And then, of course, cascading hope for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
What did I miss, Robbie?
I think I always like to try to summarize, and if I had to guess, if I were sitting in that room with the conversations you had when you were being, I'll call you a less than ideal leader compared to
being
what
a dick. Yeah.
You said it, not me. You weren't just probably cold like you've been talking about. You were also assumptive and making a lot more statements. And if I had to guess, you weren't asking questions out of curiosity. You were asking questions that were actually statements. And if I had to guess, those are some of the things. And here's the thing is, I guarantee almost every CEO of real estate teams, people of all companies on all different sides, they're going through things like this where naturally when you're feeling more anxious and concerned and afraid, our natural inclination, it's how our brain works, is to shut off like the thinking part of our brain, which is our prefrontal cortex, and go into our amygdala. And our amygdala doesn't ask questions. Our amygdala thinks we are right all the time. And what happens is you make statements. And what happens is you become more afraid, and it feeds each other, right? It creates this whole cycle. So if the thing I'd say for leaders that are watching this right now is, if you feel like you've been making a lot of statements, if you've been living in a lot of fear, take the time and have the courage to go ask the people around you how they think you're doing. And not with an intent to make statements, but with an intent to really learn and coming from curiosity. Because if you don't, the interesting thing is if you don't change that behavior, you are a lot more likely to actually see your business fail. You're going to see people up and leave. And your biggest fears that you brought up, Eric, are a lot more likely to actually come to fruition, because you're trying to do everything yourself. You're cutting out everybody else's noise, and you're like, I'm right, you're wrong, let's move forward. And that's not leadership, right? Leadership is taking in the best opinions of all the people in the room and making the best decisions moving forward. And naturally, in times like this, it's so easy to retract and go inward instead of go outward. So that would just be the biggest thing that I would caution a lot of people and push a lot of people that are watching this stage to really go and do.
Well, the truth of it is, Robbie, is I'm scared, dude. Like I'm scared that our business won't progress and it just looks the same. And I'm scared that this could financially paralyze, if not destroy us. I'm scared that people will pull the blinders off and then I get the blame. And I never want the environment to dictate how we perform. And yet we've never seen an environment so intense before. And yeah, I'm scared. And my own personal fear, my own personal insecurities manifested itself into unnecessary aggression and absolutely a lack of empathy. And since then, I've had some dynamite conversations with people. I've had a number of people reach out to me, not in my leadership group, like, hey, on Monday of last week, like, that's the Eric that we know. That's the Eric that we chose to follow. That's the Eric that I am inspired by. And well, those of you that are out there leading right now, your hands are so busy with relationships and listening. And if you haven't invested your time and doubled down on that, you're in trouble.
True. I agree 100%. And I know when we briefly chatted about a few of these things, I said the big thing that I think people were missing, like you said, was that optimistic nature of you, because that's what leaders do. There's a balance between being the ignorant optimist who is completely denying reality of what's going on. That's just stupidity. That's not smart. But balancing realism of saying, hey, this is tough. And you were saying, what's really interesting is Eric is, just so you all know, Eric is very involved with Hatch Realty. I am at like 1%. I only hear things. It's really interesting outside the ISAs. But from what I'm
always
hearing,
just compliments. You always just hear, hey, everything's going so well.
Yeah.
We better tell Robbie everything's going perfectly.
Yeah, I wish, right? What I think happened was you were being the realist that the company needed. You were talking about how these are unprecedented times, and that was good. But I think you lacked, but we will get through this. We will come out stronger. we're going to do this together. And it's probably because you were afraid.
The funny thing is, Robbie, I said those things.
Yeah, but
I didn't say them emphatically.
Correct.
Patrick Lencioni wrote a book called The Motive, and he says that our job as a leader or a CEO is to be a CRO, a Chief Repeating Officer, and that we have to say things at least 7 times for people to even understand.
Yeah.
And so they hear COVID scare conversations on social media and the news and in their own conversations, and then they heard it from me.
Yeah.
And even though I was saying, yeah, but we're going to get through, it was just so loud elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're in those moments, you have to name the reality of the realism, and then you have to go extra all in on the optimism, because that's what people need. You have to balance it, right? And you have to be balancing, and you have to fully buy into it and be energetic about it. If I had to guess, you may have been saying it, but weren't as energetic as you are feeling it right now.
Absolutely, I wasn't. Yeah.
And here's the funny thing: is the biggest thing I've been coaching people to do is, in moments like these, when there's so much fear and anxiety, what happens is our brains will overestimate how bad things could get. It's just how it works. It goes into a tailspin.
We jump to conclusions. Conspiracy theories.
Right. And just like Brene Brown talks about. And what you need to do is, what I advise people to do is fully explore that. And then almost always what you'll realize is, holy crap, what I was thinking is far worse than what it ever actually would be. And the greatest thing is this, is Eric, even if all that happened, hypothetically, if your business were to implode, if all those things potentially happened to you, dude, you've been through worse.
Yeah, I have.
And you've made it out of it, and you built big things and really amazing things. And I think we lose sight of that. We think that these things would just like kill us, right? And again, it's that reptilian brain. It's your amygdala coming out. And what you have to do is explore it, because the only way you can actually get over this is realize, even if these crappy things happen, even if your income does happen, if you go bankrupt, honestly, it's going to be all right. As odd as that sounds. Now, we don't want that, right? But you almost have to, we have an attachment to avoiding these pains, and then we create these crazy pains that keep going and going and spinning. And the greatest thing you can do is just get to a place and almost go back to the worst thing you've ever gone through, because every person I know has gone through some hell. Everyone, in different levels, right? And I almost guarantee you that even if your worst thing happened that you're imagining right now, you've been through darker days, and it helps, and it makes you feel a little bit better, a little more reassured.
Well, gang, you need to know if you're leading anyone in your world, especially in the real estate world, you got to talk about the realism of today and cast the hope for tomorrow. You need to be empathetic, and you need to give yourself some grace. So on behalf of Robbie T, I'm Eric Hatch of Hatch Coaching, reminding you that today and every day to go and do good.